Good morning and welcome to the first annual All-In Education MAPA Summit. My name is Monica Villalobos and I serve as President and CEO of your Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And I am excited to be hosting such an important and inspiring event for our community. As we have highlighted in the 2020 Datos report, Latinos are shaping our communities in many ways, from being economic drivers to social change influencers. Without the success of Latinos in every aspect, starting with education, we cannot look forward to a successful community. I would like to start by introducing two people that are truly making a difference for Latino students and the community in Arizona, Stephanie Para and Luis Avila. Realizing there was a deep gap in positions of decision-making and power in education, Luis Avila sought out to create an organization that would address that issue while elevating the voices of Latino students and families across Arizona. With the motto of nothing about us without us, Luis's vision of all-in education came to fruition. Established as a nonprofit organization in April 2020, All-In Education is led by Stephanie Para, a fierce leader who is unapologetic when it comes to doing what is necessary to change the education system that has left so many students behind. All-In Education exists to build an Arizona where all communities have access to opportunity and justice. Their work is focused on building Latino power and influence across boardrooms and classrooms in Arizona. Stephanie, tell us more.
Buenos dias, Monica. Thank you so much for hosting our inaugural MAPA Summit. The visionary MAPA Summit was a labor of love made reality by the All-In Education team. We would like to thank our sponsors for partnering with us to bring this event to life. We'd like to thank Instituto for being our Adelante sponsor, as well as Futuro and media sponsors listed on the screen. At All-In Education, we're working to address the imbalance of representation across our school systems at a state and local level. Through MAPA, the State of Arizona Latino Education, Power and Influence, we will evaluate and share findings on the makeup of the entire system, from Arizona school boards, classrooms, and Latino academic achievement. Every year, we will report on our progress towards increasing Latino representation and attainment. This annual report will serve as the MAPA, or our roadmap, for our organization to help guide our research and policy agenda while keeping us accountable in our progress. Monica?
To take a deeper look at MAPA, we would like to spend some time discussing the report findings and what they mean for Latino students and our community at large. We will be exploring themes of the gaps in representation and the opportunity gap, Arizona's complicated history with Latinos and non-white populations, as well as modern-day segregation. To begin this discussion, I would like to bring back Stephanie and Luis to help us take a look at how all of these themes are related to Latino academic performance and what the MAPA report revealed. Phoenix and Arizona are a microcosm for what the rest of the country will look like in the coming decades in terms of makeup of the population. We also see that Latinos have continuously faced barriers in being able to achieve higher status of income. Since poverty is directly correlated to student outcomes, what are the effects we are seeing holistically? Stephanie?
Yes, Monica, the data sets referenced here in MAPA actually highlight that there is a growing gap in income and wealth between upper income earners and middle and lower income families. And middle income earners are actually falling behind. What we know to be true is that Phoenix Union High School District, the school board where I currently serve as a member, a governing board member, demographic trends are 10 years ahead of the city and 20 years ahead of the state of Arizona. Our student population is over 90% students of color, 82% of which are Latino, and 77% of our students qualify for the free and reduced price lunch program. So if our demographics are the future of the city and the state, we really have, from an economic standpoint, we will be struggling in the future if we do not ensure that these students have access to opportunity to earn high-wage careers, we will fall behind. We must take action now to ensure that we have an education system that is truly providing opportunity for all students, not just for some. Monica?
And that's very important, Stephanie, because we found that same conclusion in the Datos report. In fact, one of the things I was most struck by was that in F schools, the student population is 67% Hispanic, while in A schools, only 27% Hispanic. That doesn't happen by accident, to your point. We know that these issues didn't arise overnight. It has been decades of biased policy and decisions that have caused ripple effects in the education system and across other spaces. What are we seeing currently, and how are all of these tied together? Luis, tell us more.
Thank you, Monica. And I just want to say thank you to All in Education, to Stephanie, Anais, Danny, and everybody on the team for making this such a high quality event that I hope that you all feel proud of, be participants of. To this question, Monica, I think what's important to think about is that without looking at the history, at how we got here, we want to understand the actual scope of the problem that we have in front of us. You know, Latinos have been in Arizona before this was a state, and Latinos have been in Arizona before this was a country. Full stop. We are part of this society. We are part of this community. And I think that it is important to understand that policy after policy in the past has been trying to erase us, to remove us, to not be part of the society or the fabric of society that we're trying to build. You know, we've been called many things in Arizona, but one thing that we have to also understand that this new concept, political concept of Latino also creates a huge diversity in our community. I mean, we look more diverse as a community than we were in the decades past, right? We have populations that are coming from different parts of the country, Latinos that are coming from California, that are coming from the Midwest, but also new arrivals from other countries as well that are helping us stay a vibrant and competitive state. But we have to remember also that we're still living the consequences of some of the policies that you mentioned. I mean, from POP 203, the one that we're actually debating as we speak on the English language only policy, to SB 1070, Arizona has been known to be a state that really goes after our Latino community and not be too friendly to non-white populations. And worst of that, it's been really impactful to Black and Indigenous communities. But beyond that, this clearly racist policies, there are other things that we have to think about, like the intersection with healthcare and housing, and of course, education. And when we often talk about this separately, they're actually a collection, a system that has created inequities in our society. You know, access to high quality education, for example, is related to healthcare. You know, our community is one of the most impacted during COVID because we don't have our families covered by healthcare or state insurance. We also have really serious issues when it comes to diabetes and preventative care. I mean, Latinos, to be honest, are, you know, one crisis away from going through poverty, even our middle class families, and this report shows it. But beyond that, you know, we have serious issues on wages. More than half of our households are 2 paychecks away from falling into poverty, and we are making $15,000 less a year than the rest of the community. This impacts housing, of course, in a state like Arizona, right? Where I for example, have done this program, Principal for a Day, and by luck, the last 3 years, I've been placed in an affluent community to help the principal. And, you know, they have fundraisers where they're able to raise $100,000 in one night. I mean, that's not a possibility in our neighborhoods. And these additional resources that are coming to schools help retain teachers, attract teachers, retain programs, and actually pilot some of the most important things. This is not a coincidence. Redlining through the 70s and 80s actually created the conditions that we're living in now. And these housing problems are really impacting the quality of education that our kids are receiving. Segregation in schools and in every level of the system is something that we had to address. And this paradox that we're living is that in reality, we have to look at our community as assets, right? This historical understanding of us as deficits has to stop. Not because it's a nice thing to do, but because it's a strategic thing to do. We are bilingual, we're bicultural, we're younger, we're values driven, we are resourceful, and every research shows that we're the most entrepreneurial community of all. So why would we want to erase a community that wants to actually add more to this culture in this this country. So that's a challenge, Monica, is to not only look at the past and understand that we have to address the consequences we're living today, but to look at the future, strategically thinking that we are a huge asset to make this country a better place.
Absolutely, Luis. I couldn't agree with you more. You know, what you're describing feels a lot like modern day segregation. Can we go deeper into this issue and also talk about how the funding formula plays into this? Stephanie, can you give us some more information on that topic?
Absolutely, Monica. Thank you, Luis, for that context and background on the history. It really does share a lot of what we ended up finding in the in the MAPA report. Here in this data set, you'll see that Latino students are actually being segregated or concentrated into communities that are lower ranked schools by race and socioeconomic status. What we see is that our families are actually getting trapped in a cycle of poverty. We decided as a country a long time ago that we were not going to continue to segregate students. But the report actually highlights that since the passing of Brown versus Board of Education, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the fact of the matter is that leaders have just gotten smarter or more strategic about how they keep our schools segregated. Monica, as you mentioned, the way that we fund schools based on local property taxes ensures that low-income families will not have equitable access to the necessary resources to educate their children. So instead of investing in low-income families, we currently simply label our students and our communities and then take resources away from them. And as Luis mentioned, you know, more affluent communities are able to raise dollars and provide additional programming, retain quality educators. All of those things help our students thrive. Unfortunately, for communities that are stuck in the cycle of poverty, we don't have those same opportunities afforded to them, and that's a big challenge.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more. I often say that equal funding does not equate to equity because different schools have different needs. And so for me, it's absolutely critical that we look at that history and, you know, how we got to where we are today. As these gaps in representation come to the surface, can you talk about why increasing the number of Latinos in these decision-making roles is critical to student outcomes? And Luis, I really love your motto of nothing about us without us. Tell us more.
Monica, this question is something I'm asked all the time. What tells you that Latino leadership is going to change the outcomes of students? Well, the answer is always, why not? I mean, the folks that have been in charge of the education system for the last 20 years, well, you know, I appreciate some of the gains that they've made in some communities. They haven't moved the needle with Latino students. That's a fact. You know, Latino students are actually decreasing in their academic achievement in reading, in math, in 3rd and 8th grade, which are elementary and foundational for the future of their academic success. So if I had a business where the manager is failing in the outcomes that we need for the future of that business, why would we keep that manager? Why would we keep that person in charge? So what I am proposing, and I think what we are all proposing here in All in Education, is to say, give us the keys. It's time for us to actually be the ones in charge of our own future and to make sure that we are creating a future for everyone, not just for Latino students, but because we are clairvoyant, we are smart, we are strategic, and we can do that. And Monica and Stephanie are a good example of this. I mean, we lead organizations that are thriving and that are making an impact in this community. I mean, beyond leadership, the one thing that I want to talk about is the system leaders. I mean, the number of superintendents that come from Latino communities or self-identify as Latino is in the single digits. And that's a huge issue. Why, you may say? Well, superintendents hire principals, and we all know that, you know, the more diverse the leader, the more diverse the workforce as well. So we are learning that the networks of access, the people they attract, are much less competitive when the leader is not diverse. Beyond that, principals hire teachers. And we know that when the principals are Latino or other principals of color, they attract other teachers who want to also buy into that mission. So beyond the issue of leadership in the school system, though, we have to look at not only the representation of Latinos in positions of power, but actually having power ourselves. You know, think about, for example, in the nonprofit sector. It's only about 4% of all the money that goes in philanthropy goes to organizations led by Black and Latino leaders. Just think about that. Out of all the dollars in philanthropy, only 4% goes to the amazing leadership of people who have the lived experiences to actually make a difference in the future. That's not a real bet. That is not a real change that we want to see in the future. Also, that is in Arizona, for example, we're 40% of the population, almost 40% of the population that Latinos are. So we need more executive leaders in policy, in advocacy, in philanthropy. We need to be everywhere. So nothing about us can happen without us. And to be clear, it's not that we aren't enough of us already, ready to take leadership, ready to take power. For God's sake, we have to create our own organization, All in Education, to put ourselves front and center. And let's talk the truth. I mean, even a couple of years ago, the word equity was taboo. To talk about the fact that we needed to help those who needed the most, to focus on those who needed the most, was taboo, was scary, was politically toxic. Now it's a famous word of the month and everybody's talking about equity, right? But we have to remember that leaders that have lived experiences, like the Latino leadership that we're talking about, and the programs that All in Education is evolving to make sure that we support more leaders, like the ones that are involved in the organization, have to just continue to grow. This is not a matter of equity only, it's a matter of strategy. If we want the state to thrive in the future, we have to be ready to run it, Monica.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Again, we see this in the business community as well as the public policy arena. For us, it's not just being at the table. I always say being at the table, having a seat at the table when you're bound and gagged doesn't help anyone. We have to be able to participate, set the table, and make sure that our voice is represented. Shaping our own narrative is more critical now than ever. And I want to go back to Stephanie. Earlier you mentioned that there was a direct link between Latino student academic performance and poverty. How are we seeing that play out in the classrooms and in long-term student success?
Absolutely, Monica. So the data has been very clear for a long time, and we included data sets in the MAPA report as well, but these are not new. And as Luis shared, our Latino students have been falling behind for over 2 decades. The first report came out when I was a senior in high school in 2001. The 5 Shoes report was released by the Morrison Institute, where they said that the writing is on the wall. If we do not start investing in and supporting Latino students, we will see an economic impact in our state. Here we are nearly 20 years later, and the gaps are wider. And there is a very clear correlation between Latino academic achievement and poverty. One of our data sets really looks at our Latino students being concentrated in lower ranked elementary schools. What we see is that for decades, our school systems serving predominantly low-income students and families have been asked to be social service agencies while also being held accountable to providing an equitable education. But we are not investing in these schools and in our communities to solve the systemic challenges that the communities face. Luis referenced, health issues, access to shelter, food insecurity is rampant in our community. These are all things that impact educational attainment. If a child arrives at school and they are hungry, they are worried about whether or not their mom and dad are going to be home under the threat of deportation, if they are worried about whether or not they're going to have a home to go to at the end of the school day. All of those things impact whether or not a child can fully focus and be present in their academic day. So these are things that we have to, be thoughtful about and intentional about, and it really, we really have to start looking at the systemic issues that surround our community, and really poverty is the greatest barrier to educational attainment. We have to solve for it.
As I read the report, I was so moved because I love data, because I believe data tells us stories, the most accurate stories in many cases. And when we share that data and the way that you did in MAPA and outline it, I found myself getting very angry in the pit of my stomach. This is far more insidious than I had previously thought. And so what I would encourage those who read it is to make sure that you're not just getting angry, that you're channeling that anger toward leadership, right? Making sure that we are accountable for our own destiny. And, Luis, going back to this idea of leadership, how do you foresee Latinos in leadership roles and within our community making an impact at this moment?
Monica, as Latinos, we have to think about a very critical question of ourselves. How are we going to own the future? How are we going to actually be the ones who ensure that we become the stewards of this beautiful state, the stewards of this beautiful country for everybody? So we don't become the oppressors of the future as well. So we actually become the people who pull the state into the place where we want to be. So we don't have communities that are, not having access to shelter, to food. And one of the things that I want to remind ourselves is that this is a simple action of organizing ourselves. We need to organize our people, we need to organize our ideas, and organize the money that we have in our communities. And I think that that's what All in Education is doing really well, and that's my call to action here, right? In the case of people, All in Education has this incredible idea of creating a pipeline of talent, right? So starting with Parent Education Academy, working with families who, could actually have an income by the already engagement that they have with the school system, helping other families learn how to navigate the school system, but also how to face the challenges that COVID is bringing with the virtual reality of education. That program is critical and it's seminal to be able to identify leadership who might run for school board, who might want to participate in leadership positions in the board, but who also want to come up with solutions in their own neighborhoods to some of the challenges they're facing themselves. And I think that that fits into Adelante, the program that I believe is going to be a seminal part of the work of All in Education in the future, which is preparing those next generation of leaders who might not have access to a network of funders or a network of power. And these folks are going to be able to build those networks with each other, receive the skills, the knowledge, the attitude that they will need to be the leaders that we need of the future. And then finally, the program Listos. We know that the number of people who are in leadership positions to make influence decisions in education, it's less than 10% in the state, where we are almost representing 40% of the population. This program Listos basically identifies the people who are ready, like the name says it, and prepares them to take on those leadership roles. I mean, that pipeline, it's organizing people from families, from the household to the state house, to the ballot house, basically. The second thing that I think it's important is organizing ideas. And I love the fact that All in Education has an equity task force, leaders from all across the state who come and actually challenge each other with the perceptions that they have of Latino communities. But also, All in Education now has lobbying abilities and is working in the state legislature also to learn more about how we can make an impact. But all of this costs money. So we also have to organize ourselves so we are independent politically so that we don't rely on sources of funding that come with a mandate, right? Which is unfortunately something that happens to a lot of advocacy organizations. And I think what's brilliant about what Stephanie is building is the CIEN program. CIEN, it's a program that it's inviting 100 Latinos or more to give $1,000 or more so that we can have unrestricted dollars available to take action politically so that we can actually make sure that the future is owned by us and that it's dictated by us, and that also that we are self-determined organizations so that we actually can be the courageous action takers that we want to be in the future and have the resources to back it up. So organizing people, ideas, and money, I think is the future of our community. And I love the fact that All in Education is already modeling and taking action on all of these things. And the people who are watching today, Monica, can join us in this. Become one of the CIEN Amigos, become one of the CIEN members, participate in one of the programs, and also help us connect with more school systems so that we can offer opportunities to other parents as well.
Mm-hmm. And we have the audience participating and asking questions already. So we're going to take a question from Joe Garcia of CPLC, also a friend of Datos and on the Datos committee. And he states, education is the great equalizer. Mm-hmm. Is there any question then why educational outcomes and starting points are inequitable for Latinos? Who would like to take that one?
I'll get started. I think Stephanie covered it, right? Like if we look at it in three places, right? Like early childhood education, only about 25% of our families receive access to high quality education, right? Mostly on Head Start, early childhood education, mostly Head Start programs. First Things First has done make some progress, but we still have an abysmal preparation program for kids to come ready for elementary school, for K through 12 system. We need to address the inequities in the early childhood education. Again, reading and math. Our kids are falling behind in 3rd grade and 8th grade reading level. We have to attract higher quality programs and higher quality education leaders in our system. So the funding formula that we have that incentivizes schools that are already doing well is just basically asking people to cheat, right? To game sometimes their system so that they can maintain their A rather than figure out how to get to be an A. And I think that's a question that we should be asking. And then finally, college access. I mean, every year, college, university is becoming more and more expensive. We have to look at states like Tennessee and other states that actually are offering high quality free education to people. There are conversations about community college being free. So our communities are able to access. When we are making less than $15,000 and the rest of the families in their state, it's hard, to even think about paying tuition at the level that we have it right now in the state. Stephanie.
Yeah, and I would just add, what we shared earlier, it's that, and Luis referenced this as well. I think for a long time, leaders in Arizona have viewed our community as a problem that needed to be solved, rather than assets deserving of investment. And so we have to change those hearts and minds and really ensure that leaders who are leading our state view Latino students and families as assets deserving of opportunity, deserving of justice in our education system, because we are the future of this state. And so we have to change hearts and minds around that. And that's a big component of our work.
That's definitely important. And one of the things that I've seen in the business community is always the question of why? Why should we care? And my response is always, because this is your future workforce. These are your future employees. These are your future business owners and entrepreneurs. So it's absolutely critical that we provide them with the resources they need, because we're going to need them in the future. When talking to the business community, what would you encourage them to do? How can the business community best support your efforts?
Absolutely. I think I could jump in here and just share that we need partners from all areas. There are business leaders, advocacy organizations, philanthropy groups who have a heavy influence on education policy, and we need them to join our efforts and really to work with us in understanding what the data is telling us, because the data doesn't lie. And the fact of the matter is that Latino students are falling behind academically. They have been for over 2 decades. And if we are not intentional and thoughtful in our approach going forward, there will be economic implications for the state of Arizona. And as leaders of businesses and drivers of our economy, it matters. It should matter to them. Monica, as you shared, they are, our future workforce. And so my hope is that business leaders will join and support our efforts to break down the systemic inequities that exist in our education system, whether it's policies, practices, and programs at a state or local level, to ensure that we are creating a system that is more equitable, more just, and that truly is creating opportunity for all students, regardless of what zip code they live in or where they come from. Every single student and family deserves a high quality education.
And Joyce Medina Harper from the Latina Giving Circle asked the following question: how can we organize in philanthropic institutions to fund systemic change that address these equity issues? And Joyce has been in that philanthropic space for a very long time, fighting for equity. So what would you advise her in terms of how philanthropic organizations can support this effort?
One thing I can mention, and then I mean, this is something Stephanie and I talk about all the time. So I wanna say thanks for Joyce to Joyce for bringing this question, also for the efforts of the Latina Giving Circle to actually disrupt some of these inequities in the space. I want to start by saying that it is really interesting how we are at 4% of investments when it comes to Black and Latino leaders in the nonprofit sector. The big question is, are you even tracking in your philanthropic organizations who you're giving money to? There are real challenges right now that we see when it comes to Latino leaders and their access to philanthropy. Number one, access to networks, right? We don't have wealthy networks of individuals sometimes that can give us the resources or the access to resources that we may need. So invitation-only philanthropic organizations already, limit our ability to actually access organizations. So if the philanthropic community removes that barrier of doing only invite-only, but actually open more equitable spaces, I think that's a good opportunity. The second one is staffing. I was talking about it earlier, right? 50% of Latino leaders, when asked, they want to become executive directors or lead organizations, compared to about 37% of the rest of the population. We want leadership. We want to step up into leadership. Yet, when we look at the boards of the major philanthropic organizations in the state, they don't reflect the populations that we need. And to be honest, and with all my love to some of the leadership on our communities, some of us sit on 2 or 3 boards rather than making the space for other leaders to come. We have to make sure that we have to diversify not only by the last name or racial and ethnic makeup, but also by perspective, right? Who are the people that we're bringing to the philanthropic community to ask these tough questions of ourselves? And the last one is the one that I think I started with, which is tracking. In reality, if you're not tracking who you're giving dollars to, then equity is just a bluff word. If you really want to know where your resources need to go, treat them like medicine. Treat them to go where the places are needed the most. And that is the way that I think philanthropy will change. And also for us in this public sector is to hold people accountable and, in some ways talk about it, right? If a philanthropic organization is, giving us lip service, but it's not actually taking action, we as a community need to also call them in and have conversations with them, because, it's enough of us being treated as props, that we are sometimes good for the cover of your report, but we're not good for an investment of a seed grant to start a new idea, right? That is the truth, and we have to continue talking about it.
And that's what's important, being able to do something, right? Finding our place to be able to contribute to the effort ultimately. And Claudia Rupsich from ABC 15 asked the following question: what can your average familia do to help, Latino familia do to help? Or what can people who don't have leadership positions do? I think a lot of people don't feel like they have the power to make change. And that's a great question, Claudia, right? What can we do every day, not just when we're in a position of power, but in our everyday lives that will contribute to the systemic equity of education? Luis, Stephanie, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I can jump in here. One of the things I tell parents all the time, especially Latino parents in our community, I think for a long time, and our community can be trusting of institutions, especially in the education sector, to a fault. And oftentimes it is because they don't understand the system wholly. If they are new to this country, they might not understand the American public education system. They don't know what questions to ask or how to engage. And so they kind of stay back and they fall back and they don't ask questions. And it really does matter for our parents to, nobody knows their kids better than them. Parents know what's best for their kids, and they have to be involved in their child's education, hold high expectations of their child, hold high expectations of their educators, and ask questions and get engaged and hold them accountable to providing the services and supports that your child needs. We see this a lot, especially with our English learner population. We see this a lot with students with special needs, where families are not getting basic needs met. And instead of pushing the system to support, parents tend to fall back. And so we want to encourage parents to advocate on behalf of their students. They are the best advocates for their kids, and really push the system to support their children.
And that's one of the most important things. I think nothing kills a child's spirit more than low expectations. We have to have those high expectations. I have 2 boys, they're very 9 and very 11, and people think that I'm really harsh when it comes to education, because I often say education isn't just an opportunity, it's a non-negotiable for us. This is something that we do in our family, and it's something that we should do in our community in one way or another, whether it's formalized education or different kinds of education and experience, right? And so we also have Nora Reyes, who asked, can you provide more information regarding the Listos program? And that's one of the things that I've been so impressed by, is that your organization isn't just putting out a research report and saying, you know, here are the issues, but like us in Datos, we want actionable data, right? What can we do? And you've created programs like Listos to help decrease that inequity in education. Tell us more about Listos.
Yeah, I can jump in. So Luis shared a little bit about our leadership pipeline that we're building. Listo actually stands for Leaders in Support of Transformational Opportunities. It'll be a 3-month academy that we launch in the fall for leaders in the community who are ready to take their leadership to the next level. As Luis shared, we will focus on making sure that the people that go through our program are values aligned, that they will be unapologetic leaders who advocate on behalf of our community, that they are focused on advancing opportunity and justice for all students, and that they know how to effectively govern. I know so many school board members who have joined local boards, and once they get on, they get overwhelmed. They don't know how to navigate the system, and so they feel like they aren't making a difference in that role. And for leaders of color in particular, that can be very disempowering and discouraging, and have them fall back and step out of that leadership position. And so for us, Listo will really be an academy that gets them ready to lead and ready to effectively govern, so that they are truly creating opportunity for all students, whether they're on a local board or a state board. And so that's the bench that we are building, and we're really excited to launch that program this fall.
I think there's going to be a lot of strength in that bench. One of the other things that I was impressed by is this parents program. And it really struck me because I know that when I went to university, I was the first one, like many of us in my family, to go to university. And there was no example, there was no sort of role model, there was no one to show me how to navigate that system. And even in the lower grades for parents, I've often seen parents that need the children, the first grader or the third grader, to translate for them, right? To be able to talk to the teachers and to the school district. How is your program, the one that specifically works with parents, empower them to be part of their child's education?
Yeah, we're really excited about this program. The Parent Educator Academy is a partnership with Chicanos por la Causa and the New Teacher Project, both incredible organizations who are helping us support the parents in our inaugural cohort. So parents are actually getting workforce ready support through CPLC, where they're getting upskilled, right? What do they need? What we heard from families last spring is that they were really struggling with being asked to be instructional assistants at home in this, distance learning environment, and being handed technology but not given the skills to navigate that technology effectively. And so what PEA in response is doing is giving parents the skills that they need to support their kids at home. So CPLC helped our parents really gauge whether or not they were ready for the academy, and our partners at the New Teacher Project are running a 6-week program with our parents to really have them understand the education system as a whole, but also, how to provide support for their kids. If it is reading intervention support, math support, they are essentially becoming trained to be those instructional assistants that we've asked them to be. We'll also have them working with teachers in the schools. So we might have, one teacher, one parent, or one teacher, two parents paired up, and they will become a teaching team. And so another thing that we learned last spring was from Tucson actually has an incredible program where they built a community of support for families, predominantly for Latino families. And while I was hearing from parents all over the state who were overwhelmed and frustrated with distance learning, in Tucson I heard parents who said, you know what, I've never been so empowered to be a part of my child's education. Tucson has done a really great job in including parents. And so what we learned from that model is that parents value a community of support. And so that's what we also hope Parent Educator Academy will bring. We're already hearing from parents in the program who say, like, this has really inspired me to join a parent group. And if there isn't one, we're telling them you're going to start a parent group at your school community and start creating that support network for families. And so we want to be that support partner for our parents through this program. And the beauty of Parent Educator Academy is that, you know, the economic impact has also been really, really challenging for Latino families and low-income families, the economic impact of the pandemic. And so we want to be an organization that models what, you know, practices what we preach. And so if we are saying that our community is deserving of opportunity, we want to provide opportunity for our community. So Parent Educator Academy is going to meet educational needs of students, but also provide economic opportunity for our parents. And so we think that this could be also a very strategic way to start diversifying the teaching profession, which, as Luis referenced, we need to work on. And in the MAPA report you saw, it's only 16% Latino. So can we upskill parents? Can we put them on a pathway to become future paraprofessionals, maybe future certified educators? And for some, maybe they will be future school board members. So those are, you know, to us, that's the investment that we want to make in our community, is, again, viewing them as talent that is deserving of investment.
I love that we're really diving deep, not only into the problem, but more importantly, into the solutions. I'm one of those parents, and I think that that program, the Parents Academy, isn't just for parents that are less familiar with educational institutions, but for all of us. Frankly, I didn't know that fifth grade math was so hard. And if there were resources that I could use that would help me help my child, that is something powerful. And I think that's one of the best solutions that I've heard, when parents can really feel like they can help their children move forward. That's what we live for, right? We also have a question from Jill Humphreys. How can we support our district public schools to do better? How can we close gaps for minorities? It's kind of a $1 million question, right?
Yeah, one of the things that I would say, Jill, thank you for that question. I think it needs, you know, this system was built by, you know, for decades by many people. It's going to take many people to also undo some of the inequities that were created from the very beginning, right? But I'm going to tell you that one of the most powerful things, I think, are the facts of data. We have to start asking questions in our own school boards. For example, I've been working with school districts that are asking questions about which are the students that are doing better academically, which ones are the students that are more challenged academically, which are the schools in our system that are thriving and why. Do we have programs that we can move students or teachers, high quality educators, to schools that are being more challenged when it comes to academic performance? So one of the things that I think we can start with is by just looking at real numbers and to stop making excuses for the fact that we adults actually are in charge of the education of the children and the education of their future. We can't continue to blame families and students for the results that we are producing as adults. We have to stop making excuses and put it on the child when the child is only showing up to learn, right? If that child has issues, behavioral issues in the classroom, there's probably something behind that, right? It's the lack of access to opportunity for their families, lack of programming and behavioral health at the school. It might be that they don't see themselves reflected on the curriculum, and you know, it's an affront to them when they hear the history that is being told to them that is different from the one that they've been perceiving with their family. I mean, these things are important, and we have to speak truth. And I think that that is a time of reckoning in this country, and especially here in the state of Arizona, for us to actually speak truth to power and say, can we address some of the inequities that we created? How is it that some of our most sought after schools are bilingual schools in our state, yet you know, the English only law prevents, you know, Spanish-speaking kids from speaking Spanish in the classroom with their teachers? That is just hypocritical. That is just wrong. And if we don't speak about this as a real hypocritical stance on the ways that we educate our children, you know, and we can go down the line on funding and teachers attraction and teacher retention. Each one of those issues have an equity lens that we have to look through. So for Jill, let's pull the data. Let's see who are the kids that are most impacted, where do we need to make the decisions, and who we need to include in those decisions to make sure that everybody has buy-in in the process.
Excellent. This is great data, information, and solutions. I hope you're all picking up on these cues, feeling empowered. I'm going to send it over to Stephanie to close us out just a little bit, but definitely download the report. I think you're going to find some great work in there.
Thank you so much, Monica. And as Luis referenced, we really have to come together to make the changes we need in our education system. We need all of us. It is going to take all of us using the power and influence we have as leaders in our community. And so I invite you all to take the pledge to be all in for equity and stand with us to lead Latino students to better outcomes. Please visit allineducation.org/partners and sign our pledge today. This framework is guiding our organization. It is driving our solutions, and we invite you to join us in those efforts. And finally, again, we want to thank our sponsors, Instituto. Thank you so much for being our Adelante sponsor. We would also like to thank our Futuro sponsors, ADM Group, Right-Hand Construction, Midstate Energy, Wholesale Floors, Norcon Industries, Progressive Roofing, Stone Cold Masonry. Your sponsorship was critical in making this report and summit possible. And of course, our media sponsor, Univision Arizona Contigo. We appreciate your partnership in helping us continue to connect with our community in a meaningful way.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and Luis, for all of your work. We would also like to thank all of you for participating in today's MAPA Summit. We ask that you take this information and use your power and influence to help create the changes we need to make impactful shifts in our communities. Our hope is that future MAPA Summits will be held in person. Keep a lookout for future reports and events from All In Education, and don't forget to download the full report at the link on the screen. Thank you and have a great rest of your week.